it was mostly meeting together separately with the director and then separately with the two parties. I don't know what it means, exactly how it worked. It wasn't sort of one big mediation as such.
No, it was always present.
Not always. No, not always. Not always necessary.
No.
Particularly when things like working relationships and
Put your microphones on.
sorry?
Microphones, but you need to switch you on.
Oh, switch me on, yes.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the next second in the series celebrating women mediators. And Jane very helpfully has come along to share a real case that she's mediated in a boardroom dispute. Disputes are not often seen, but we can now get the benefit of. So thank you for all of you coming in person, to all of you online. And I should make a special mention to countries like Greece, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Singapore, Malaysia, who are all watching right now. In our last simulation, Jane, we had 3,000 views in 24 hours, so no pressure. But along with Jane, we've got Susan Aliamani, and we've got Tiffany Rochelle Lewis Byfield, who are helping us as parties. So I'm going to leave you to it, and if you want to explain how you're going to start, benefit the people watching online, and see you in a short while.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to start actually with a private meeting here with Charlie, so if you can sort of step out with role players if that was real. So Charlie, is that okay if I call you Charlie?
Of course.
Go ahead. Thank you. You call me Jane.
Thank you.
Joe Wise, the director, has asked me to come and meet you just to explore a situation at work and to see if I can help, and in particular whether mediation might be able to help you. So I know we had a brief chat on the phone, but we said I'd come in and have a meeting with you, and so that we could just explore a little bit. So tell me a little bit about what the situation is and.
Well, it's a tentative situation. I have been working at the company for 5 years now. I am the senior HR advisor. Though for many periods during the 5 years, I've had to be acting HR director, and I guess this is where the issue lies. There is currently a HR director. It's not the first. There have been 3 directors that have come and gone during my period, and I just don't feel that he is pulling his weight. I feel that he is incompetent, and that has had a significant impact on myself, my ability to perform my job, but mostly the department. The whole HR department can feel it, and that's affected the way the HR department performs, which of course impacts the company. And at this point in time, I've reached a stage where I feel that there may be no other option but for me to leave, unless the director leaves. It's not an ideal situation, but I don't want to, but this is where I am.
So thank you very much for explaining that to me. So what I'm hearing is you've been at the organisation for about 5 years.
Yes.
And during that time you've had different roles. You are primarily the HR administrator, is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
HR advisor.
HR advisor.
We have an HR administrator as well.
Okay. But you have at times been asked to step into the director's role due to the fact there hasn't been an acting director.
That's correct, yes.
And you also said there's been some issues with finding a suitable HR director, so there have been periods of time where you either haven't had a director or you've been acting director.
That's right.
But this particular director, I think you said is called Chris.
Yes, Chris Brand.
Chris Brand. You're not getting on very well with, but it's not just you. What you said a number of other people in the department are not happy at the moment.
Indeed.
And so you said there's a big impact on the department and also on you. And what you finally said was it's having such an impact on you that you feel you might have no alternative but to leave the organisation.
Yes, that's correct.
And so I don't know what Joe explained to you about my role as a mediator and how I might be able to help you, but what do you feel you need to be able to resolve or move forward with this situation?
I feel that I would need to know that there is some way forward for me to be able to continue performing my role in a suitable environment, in an environment which is productive, where we can all work well and where we are led properly as a director should be leading. And to be honest, I need to know that I have future prospects, because to be honest, I feel that I should have been the HR director. I put myself forward for it and the board didn't choose me, although I believe I'm far more competent and able to do it.
So you put yourself forward as HR director at some time in the past, and there's a sense of disappointment I'm hearing that you didn't get that role.
Yes, great disappointment.
And you're now looking, as well as resolving this, as to what your future in the organisation is.
Yes.
So what's your understanding of my role as a mediator and how I might be able to help you?
I imagine that you are here to help us find a solution before we have to end up in a tribunal. We work in HR, so we're well versed with dismissal situations leading to tribunal, and I think that we're here to see if we can work things out, if we can find a solution between ourselves.
I'm sure both you and Chris are well aware of how unresolved conflict escalates in an organisation.
Yes,
so,
indeed.
Yeah. Okay, so my role as a mediator would be very much to help you and Chris to have a conversation if you'd be willing to meet together, and that's what I will ask you both at the end. So I'll be meeting with Chris after this interview, after this meeting, and have the same conversation with both of you, and to ask you if you'd be willing to meet together, because if it would be helpful to have a conversation together, that's what I would help you with. And my role in that is very much as a facilitator of the conversation itself. So to help you, I'm imagining perhaps your ability to have a conversation with each other at work or about some of these issues has kind of broken down or isn't working very well. Would you say that was?
I'd say that's absolutely correct, because one of the issues that I believe Chris is unable to do is to communicate well, and so that means that both he and I are unable to communicate, and given that we are the two most senior people in the department, that becomes difficult, as well as difficult for us to relay our issues with each other.
So in a mediation meeting, if we have one, a couple of things. The first thing I would say is it would be confidential. So it would be just the three of us meeting together, and nothing of that would be reported outside of that room. So it'd be confidential to you, not reported back to other directors or to the manager, unless there was a specific outcome. But anything you felt you wanted to say about the organisation and about working with each other would be confidential to that room. So there'd be a kind of safety net around it, if you like. And then I would be facilitating the conversation in a sense that it would be for you both to explore the way forward and to work out, what might be some possible solutions, what might be some possible outcomes to the situation you both find yourself in, and to make your own choices of those. But also an opportunity to hear each other and to hear what the issues are from each other's perspective, because I'm sure you've got some sort of thoughts about that, some assumptions about what the situation is for Chris as well as for yourself. And so it's an opportunity to try and hear those, and to hear what's going on and what the other person thinks and feels, as well as to share your own thoughts and feelings as we go through the day. But it's very much to try and come to an outcome, but an outcome that you find for yourself. So really, in the mediation as I run it, it's your day, you're in control of where the meeting goes, what the outcome is, and where you get to. And I'm just guiding that conversation and helping to make it as effective as possible. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And do you have any questions about that, Charlie?
No, I think you've helped me understand
Okay.
how this is going to unfold in terms of your role. So, okay.
All right. Thank you. So I wonder if you would mind asking Chris to come in and have a chat with me too.
Of course. Thank you
That
very
would be
much.
great. Thank you very much. Okay, if I call you Chris? That's fine, thank you. My name's Jane. I think Jo sent you a copy of my biography as a...
she did.
You've had a look at that. So Chris, I just had a chat with Charlie, and I promised Jo, your director, that I'd have a chat with both of you to see if I'd be able to help you, to see whether this process called mediation might be helpful to you. I know you're both work in the HR field, and you've got some experience of that, and also some experience of the HR and grievance process, so you're sort of well aware of the processes that sit behind the kind of situation.
Yes.
But the aim of this meeting is just to sort of explore how I might help you, just to get to know each other, and for me to understand a little bit of the background to your concerns, and to see if you'd be willing to have a meeting with Charlie, a mediation meeting, to see if you could find an outcome. So tell me a little bit about the situation from your perspective, what's going on.
So, I don't know what you would have been told about my role, but I'd taken on this role as the Director of Human Resources, and at the time they were finding it very hard to fill that role. I was very thrilled to get the job. I felt like I had the expertise to be able to take it on. And at the time, Charlie had stepped in that interim period to fulfill that role, basically. But I've just found that in my time of trying to do my job, that I've gotten quite a lot of criticism from Charlie, or she's kind of gone out of her way to make things quite difficult for me in my role. So that's kind of where the main issue has arrived from.
Okay. So you said you've been here 20 months,
20
did you
months.
say, about 20 months, and that there's been a sort of escalation or growing sense of unease with Charlie, and that you feel criticised in your role by her, which is making your job difficult.
Yeah, and I'm quite concerned because I'm quite supportive of Charlie, and I've done, I try and support a lot of the employees, but with Charlie I think I've made quite an effort with her to progress her in the department and in the company altogether. So I was quite surprised when this kind of issue came up.
Yes, I'm hearing a sense of disappointment there, that you feel you've put a lot of effort into helping her.
Yeah,
and
it's someone that I thought I was supporting, but clearly that's not what she sees in the situation.
Okay, so one of my roles, if we were to have a mediation meeting, would be to help you to look and see, why do you see the situation differently? Why do you both see and experience this situation in a different way, and to hear each other's perspective on that. How else do you think mediation might be able to help you?
I think it's just in terms of everyone else being being able to understand my role in the company,
Mhm.
and there are, like, just to understand why I do particular things or why I've kind of gone out my way to change things in the company. It would be nice for them to understand that, and then maybe they would see that I'm actually doing my role and doing my job.
So an outcome for you would be not only for Charlie to better understand what you're trying to achieve in the company, but for that to sort of filter through to other people to better understand and sort of appreciate what you're doing at work. Is that right?
Of course, because my role is to kind of bring together the department of HR. So I just want to ensure that, in terms of like employee relations, that is something that is sorted.
So in terms of mediation, I know you've got some understanding of mediation from your role, but if I just explain and then you maybe ask some questions if you've got any. As you know, mediation is a confidential process, so it would just be the three of us in a meeting, and none of that would be reported back to the directors or anybody else in the organisation unless you wanted to, except obviously they want to know what the outcome is, and particularly in terms of your working relationship. But any conversation that we have is confidential, as is our conversation now. I mean, I would report that back to Charlie and vice versa. So that's confidential, and it wouldn't impact if it did go further into some formal process. Then none of the conversation would be taken into that process either. And in fact, I would give you in a minute a mediation agreement, which I think I sent through to Joe to show you. That you would both sign. But my role in the mediation would be very much to facilitate the conversation between you, to help you to sort of hear and understand each other, and also to work out the way forward. So I don't offer any solutions myself, and I don't make any judgments about which of you is more right or wrong. It's really just to facilitate your conversation and your exploring the situation in a bit more depth and understanding where you might go with that and what the solutions might be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
And do you have any particular questions for me from the background you've read or about the process?
No, not at the moment.
Okay. So would you be willing to have a meeting with Charlie? Would that be?
I think if she's willing to listen, then of course.
That's great. Okay. Should I go and get that would be fabulous, thank you. So just a quick aside to the camera, in reality this session might be on a different day at a different time. Sometimes, particularly in the mediations I do, I might do those set-up meetings in the office with the parties, and then we might have the mediation meeting on a different day at a different time. Partly that gives people time to sort of think about the process and so on. So here we are, whatever the time of day is on a different day. So welcome both. Thank you very much for coming back and for making the time today to have this meeting. Let me just check with you before we start. You know what? I know you're both busy, but have you got particular time constraints today? How long have you got available for this meeting?
I might have to leave early because I have kids to pick up.
Okay, that's helpful to know. And what about you?
I'm comfortable.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm available as long as you are, so no constraints from my side. Just the formalities before we start. This is the mediation agreement which Joe sent you, and I think you've had a look at, but before I forget, I'd like to ask you just to sign that, both of you. And that really just confirms what we talked about in our private meetings about the today being confidential, and so on. Thank you very much. And I will obviously sign that as well, so that I promise that everything is, from my perspective, is confidential too, and I wouldn't be reporting back to your management team about our conversation today. So, I did speak to you both when I met you individually about the mediation process and explained a little bit about it. So I'd just like to ask you what you're hoping to get from this particular session today. How are you hoping it might go?
Well, I think the first and probably most important thing is that I'd like to see an end to this difficult atmosphere at work. I see there is, make sure the department is working as it should be.
Okay, so Charlie, for you, an end to the atmosphere at work and making sure the department works more clearly would be a good outcome from today.
Yes, and then I can see where my future lies.
Okay, I have to see where your future lies. That's helpful. Chris, what about you?
I just would like everyone to see that the atmosphere is unnecessarily just a tricky situation to be in, and for everyone to understand that I am trying my best in the role, and there are things that I'm trying to put in place to be able to fulfill my role.
So again, for you, creating a better atmosphere at work and a better understanding of your role by people, in particular Charlie. And one of the things you've both talked about is creating a better atmosphere at work. So there's some common ground there that you're both would be an ambition or a goal for both of you. I don't think today is not necessarily going to be easy, and I talked to you about what my role is. My role is to facilitate your conversation. Don't expect it necessarily to be easy. Obviously you've got different points of view, but we'll work through those. One of the things I'd say is, if you do need to take a break at any time, it's important that you do that. Likewise, if you feel you'd like to have a conversation with me privately, like we did originally, just say so. So it's important that you feel comfortable during the day, that that you're taking the time. If you need some food or drink, that you're doing that, as well as making maximum use of the time. So, but it's important that you're feeling comfortable, and particularly if you don't feel happy with anything, that you say so. Especially if you feel you'd like to chat to me about it. So we've talked about the mediation agreement. I'm just wondering in terms of, I don't set ground rules, but I'm just wondering in terms of guidelines or things that you think might help the mediation or the conversation go well today, what kind of things those might be? Is there anything you're particularly worried about that you'd like to flag up and say now?
Well, I've heard that there is, I feel that this would be more productive if Chris avoids making suggestions about my professional conduct.
Okay. So you would feel more comfortable if you didn't have suggestions made about your conduct?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I don't believe it's accurate, and it's certainly not really the core of the issues.
Anything for you, Chris, that's important to the sort of guideline in terms of how you both conduct yourselves in the conversation?
Just to listen. I just want to be heard in the situation.
That's helpful. So I don't know where you'd like to start. Who would like to both get equal amount of time, as much time as you need, really? But is there anybody particularly would like to start?
Well, he's the director, so I would like to hear from him first.
I'm happy to go first.
Okay, I guess that would be wonderful. Thank you.
So obviously there's the understanding that my attitude at work hasn't been the greatest, and it's been said that people have been pulling me up on certain behaviours that I've had at work. I just wanted to address those at first because I feel like that's quite a big contributor as to why people feel I'm not doing my job correctly. As you know, we have been working pretty long hours, and it has been said that I've been coming in late to work or leaving a bit early without telling anyone. In fact, I haven't. It's not that I haven't been telling anyone that or asking for permission to leave early. It's just that I have quite a young family, and that's something that I need to do. And you can understand that working 12-hour days they're not good for anyone's well-being. And that is something, as a HR director, that's something I am trying to correct. I am trying to make sure that everyone's well-being is looked after. And I have spoken to people like Joe, I've spoken to the CEO, but nothing's been done about it. She doesn't address the situation. So at the end of the day, it's me that it comes down to, and people think it's my responsibility to ensure that the days aren't as long, but it's not.
So Chris, you're saying it sounds like there've been some criticisms about your timekeeping in particular, and you're giving some reasons for that, in particular that you've got a young family at home, but it sounds like you feel that there's been some criticism levelled against you, perhaps by Charlie and perhaps by others in the department. You just wanted to explain what's behind that. So I don't know if you've got anything else you want to add to that.
I feel like it's just they're saying that it's affecting my performance, and I don't think it is. There are, like, for example, I was talking about like employees' well-being. There is kind of a well-being policy that I'm trying to put in place for everyone, and just because I'm leaving early doesn't mean that I'm not doing my job. I'm just trying to look after my family and have a better work-life balance, and trying to do that same thing for everyone else in the company.
So what I'm hearing is that for you, one of the drivers for your job is this well-being policy, and you're trying to put that into practice, but also, you know, you're trying to role model that in the way you conduct your own work. But you're feeling criticised, and you're feeling that actually people are assuming you're not working hard enough.
Yeah.
And that's a problem within the organisation. Is that a wider problem? Do more people perceive that, do you think?
I think it is a wider problem. It is something that has been mentioned to me in terms of working the long hours, not really having a good work-life balance. I think for a lot of people in the company, they have older children, so they don't have the same kind of approach as me in terms of having to leave early or having to kind of invest more time in family life because they've been through that already. So it is something that I am trying to address, or has been trying to address.
Charlie, do you have a particular thoughts or something you'd like to express from your own perspective?
Yes. So I do understand that work-life balance is important, and I commend you on, you know, ensuring that your family needs are met. And I would support that, and I would support that policy had you relayed to me, who are effectively your number two, that this was a policy you're looking to implement. And I would also support it if you were, even whilst developing this policy, actually implementing it internally in your own department. But if you're not working the hours that we're working, and we're still here, so there is myself and there's 4 other people in the department. We're all working 10 to 12 hours a day, but you've decided that this is a good policy, and I do believe that, and I support it. But you haven't told us. You haven't said to us, well, hold on a second, it's not healthy for you to be working these hours either. So effectively, what it means is that we're having to pick up the slack. And just because I don't have children, so I don't have the same time pressures that you may have, does that mean I should work longer hours? You mentioned talking to Joe, the CEO, but if you want to implement that kind of policy, surely you're meant to lead by example. We're meant to make it work within our department. It's not for her to run our department. It's for Joe to decide whether that's a policy that could be implemented throughout the company, but it's for you as director to decide whether that's something that should happen within our department. So if you wanted that to happen, you could have had that happen all of this time. But instead, for us, it appears that you're working less hours than we do. You haven't said to us, well, actually, I might be coming in late, but I'm still on the clock from 8 o'clock, but I have to be at home because of childcare situations, and therefore you can still reach me remotely. There's been no discussion about that, no communication whatsoever. That is the problem. You come up with initiatives, there is no follow through, no plan how to implement it, and no communication with your department. How on earth could you possibly try to convince a CEO to implement that throughout the company? It just feels like we're getting the short end of the stick, and this is a great excuse right now. And of course, I couldn't turn around as HR, as a senior HR advisor, I couldn't turn around and say, no, you shouldn't have work-life balance, because of course you should. That's where I feel.
So Charlie, thank you, and I can hear that you do feel very strongly about this particular point, but you did start off by saying that you understood where Chris was coming from, and in particular, you know, that you supported this initiative for sort of well-being. What I heard you say is, though, that you felt there was a gap between sort of the policy and the practice as it's existing at the moment, and that it doesn't seem to be playing out in practice in terms of how the rest of the department, the hours you're working. So it feels to you, and maybe to others in the department, that you're working longer hours and harder, despite this policy existing, or, you know, but you're not quite sure how that works in practice. So that might be one of the things we could explore in the course of this mediation is, you know, what's the gap between that in, you know, as a policy in theory and in practice, and why isn't it working, and why isn't it impacting on, you know, why is there the frustration for you and some of your colleagues as to how that works in practice? So I wonder if that's something we might explore as part of this mediation, is what the answer to that particular issue might be. Is there anything else? I wonder where you'd like to go from here. So that's one particular thing that it clearly is a, you know, frustration between you, and where you have some agreement but also some differences about how you perceive that. Are there other issues as well you'd like to explore?
One of the main issues I have with Charlie at the moment is the fact that she's trying to take every opportunity that she can to complain about my performance, or how I'm not a very good leader, or I'm not managing the team very well. And I feel as though that does come with some of the animosity she has towards me taking on the role. Like I had said before, I do appreciate that she was the interim HR director at the time when they didn't have anyone to fill the role. So she, I don't know if you expected to get the role, and it was, I guess it would be upsetting if someone else was to get it, but I had worked really, really hard to get into the position that I was in. And I was really happy to be promoted to that position, but I feel like she's using that against me, and it's just that's adding to the atmosphere that we have at work at the moment.
Okay, so Chris, again, some understanding from you that you realise the situation Charlie's in, and that having applied for the job that you finally got, but you feel that perhaps there's an underlying sense of resentment perhaps, or concern about that still, that's impacting on your relationship. And again, that might be something we could explore and work out whether that can be resolved or not. Do you have anything else you want to add to that, Chris?
Not to that particular point.
No. Do you have anything you want to say to that, Charlie?
I have to be honest, I do. I do harbour some resentment. I don't think that that's unnatural. If I did want the role, then I did then and still do believe that I would be better equipped for your role. However, having said that, you're not the first HR director during my tenure. And in our role in HR, we understand that you don't get every job that you want, and you still have to understand how to work with other people. But I think the problem is the fact that you came in, and as a director, I would expect that you that you lead the department, that you show good management skills. That would allay my concerns. If you came in and you led us as a group, that would show me that why it is that they've chosen you. If you came in and you managed the department well, I couldn't really argue with that. But you haven't done that. And it's not as if in the beginning when you first came in, you sat me down even personally and said, well, look, you know, I appreciate that you applied for this role, but, you know, I know that you didn't get it, but, you know, recognizing the fact that I have been performing your role. This, just before you came, it was a 6-month stint, and it wasn't the first period of time where I've had to perform your role. I've been performing it without the title, but I haven't gotten any recognition of that from you. It's not as if you came to me and said, okay, I've come onto the role, I can see that you've been doing it for all this time, you know, I would like to bring these things in. What would you like to, you know, what's your feedback or my input into any of it? Given I have been working with this department for 5 years. So I feel that's poor leadership. But admittedly, I do have some resentment, but it's not allayed by
So, Charlie, thank you for sharing that, because that's obviously quite a personal thing for you, that, you know, you feel quite deeply about not having got the job, and you've been honest to say that that does underlie some of your feelings in this mediation, but you've also talked a bit about the sense of your expectations in terms of leadership skills from Chris, and it sounds like that might be something you'd like to explore as to one of the reasons why you feel as you do about Chris's presence in the department or the way he's behaving. So I've kind of flagged that up as perhaps something else we might talk about in terms of moving forward. Is there anything else that occurs to you both that are things that you'd like to talk to each other about or explore solutions to while we're here today?
I'd like to touch on one last thing. I was off sick for stress for quite some period of time because of the way that things were handled in the department, and it's, to be honest, it's become untenable. But when I came back, you know, at no point did you even bother to ask me, how do you feel now? I mean, it's not as if I was off sick for 3 days. You know, it was clear it was stress related, you know, period of absence, but you're the HR director. This is our role. This is what I would do for other employees who had to take absence for stress related issues. The first thing I would do before they even go back to carrying on their role, I would invite them in to have a sit down meeting with me and say, how are you feeling now? How are things? Where are you at? But you didn't. So I feel that, yes, I feel aggrieved by that, but I also think that's perhaps reflective of your complete hands-off approach.
So what you said, Charlie, is when you came back from work, you'd been off for quite some time sick, and you felt disappointed, decided if that's the right word to use, that Chris hadn't checked up on how you were feeling. It may have been a symptom of your underlying relationship, but you nevertheless felt disappointed that that wasn't happening, because it would be something in an HR role that, you know, you would be seen as part of the HR role to inquire about someone. So there's a sense of concern there about, you know, how your relationship, I don't know, what would you see you were looking for in the way forward from that particular position?
Well, you have to treat, if I am off sick, or if anybody in the HR department is off sick, or if something happens to one of us, you also have to perform the same role that you would do for any of the other external employees. It's not just us as a department. I would ordinarily handle that, but it's not the HR administrator to handle those kind of issues. All management, any board member who has any issues also needs a HR person to communicate with, to deal with.
Charlie, you talked there about a hands-off approach. I didn't know if you had a particular, something you were getting at by that term, hands-off approach. What did you mean there?
Well, I feel that Chris is very good at coming up with initiatives, using schemes, and some may be very valid, but you're the ideas person, but you can take a complete hands-off approach on how will they be implemented, how do we monitor them, what happens, the day-to-day operations. We deal with all of that, and we take no concern with it. It appears to us that you come in, you share ideas, and then you go to your office and you do your thing. You're not communicating with us. You're not dealing with the day-to-day or asking about it. So I'm not really sure that for me is hands-off.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. That's helpful because you'd use that phrase, and so I think you've said again, and it's helpful to acknowledge positive things, that Chris is very good at coming up with policies and schemes and things. That is possibly a strength, but it's something that he does well. But you've then said that there's a sense that goes with that is that there's no follow through, or that there's a hands-off approach, and that leads back to your beginning point as well. Is there anything else either of you would like to say, or would you like me to just kind of summarise where we've got to so far?
I have nothing else to say.
Okay, so thank you both, and I've just noted 2 or 3 things that you said when you were both sort of sharing your concerns. In particular, you've talked about the sort of role that Chris has, and acknowledged Chris's strength in creating policies and initiatives, and one of those is this wellbeing initiative, although you feel there's a bit of a hypocrisy, if you like, in the way that that's not being followed through in terms of the way the staff are working. But to me that seems as though maybe there's an issue there around, if that policy exists, why is it not followed through in practice, and how does that impact on your team's working hours? That seems to be one issue we might talk through a little bit more. You talked as well, Charlie and Chris, about Chris's role and about what leadership looks like and what the expectations are of you of each other. And then you've talked again about your personal relationship and a feeling of a lack of concern for you, particularly when you've been off sick. So that's kind of how do you treat each other on a day-to-day basis, and in particular if there's something not noticed. I've got those 3 issues. We can talk about any more, but I wonder if I might, and as I said at the beginning, this is for you to come up with your own thoughts. It's not for me to therefore make a judgment about whether I agree with either of you, or to come up with any solutions for you, although I might have some ideas, because it's for you to think about what might be the solutions to those, and to see what you might agree on, and if there is a way forward, and in particular if there's a way forward for you to continue working together. Do either of you, let me just check, need a break at the moment? Do you feel the need for a break, or are you happy to carry on? That's good. So let me just ask you, on any of those issues, have you got particular ideas for how you might move forward? What kind of outcome, if I put it that way, are you looking to achieve? It's a difficult question. It's often the hardest one for people in mediation. When I say what outcome are you hoping to achieve, people often don't really know. They know they've got something they're worried about, but they don't know where they want to get to. So you might want to just think about where is it you're trying to get to in terms of sort of concrete things, but also sort of how you think and feel in your role.
I think in terms of Charlie's mentioned that she was sick at one point. I have always been really supportive of of everyone's kind of prospects in the company and supporting them. And I guess out of that situation, I don't know what we could do to fix that situation except for me to say sorry because I didn't realise that you were sick. But in terms of supporting Charlie, I've always kind of been encouraging her to build her own individual development. So I don't really see why that particular thing is an issue that we have to discuss.
Okay. So, Chris, you've said sorry there that you didn't acknowledge that. So that's maybe helpful to Charlie. I don't know, but you've also said you didn't really sort of notice what was going on particularly, and that you felt that your attitude is supportive in other ways, and those other ways are supporting her when she's sort of developing herself and that kind of thing. So there's a sense in which you feel you are supportive. There's a sense in which Charlie feels that you didn't notice something that was going on for her. So, you know, I'm just wondering how you would bridge that gap between you. And in particular, I'm looking for you to say, if you're going to continue working together, what is it you need? What is it both of you need from each other to be able to, you know, restore a sense of a good working relationship? What does that look like in terms of these issues or anything else?
Better communication. I would expect, you know, I am open and happy to communicate with you, but you are my director, and so you need to show that you are, you know, you want to achieve better communication, you know, so, you know, check-in meetings, something that we could do that would show where we could talk out the issues or what is happening, but that way you would have noticed if I had been absent, if we were having regular communication between us.
So Charlie, you've talked there about better communication, but you've also come up with an idea, which is check-in meetings. So I'm assuming perhaps you don't have regular check-in meetings, or that perhaps you could have them more often, or with a different sort of focus on them. So that's something. Do you have any thoughts about that?
It's something that I haven't considered with Charlie. It is something that I have to do on a regular basis with the CEO and the vice president of the company, but it's not something I will do like downwards.
Okay. So there's one idea there is having regular check-in meetings between you. If you did that, you know, what would you be looking for, Charlie? Weekly, or what would be? What's the sense in which you would?
I think I appreciate that time constraints sometimes mean that it's not possible to do that weekly at the senior level, but you know, fortnightly certainly, you know, and where there are a lot of demands, then yes, possibly weekly, but at the minimum I would expect a fortnightly sit down.
And just to be clear, how would you say that, you know, if that were to be something you were to take forward and was a sort of outcome and agreement from today, how would you make sure that that was happening, and how would you make sure that those were effective meetings? Is there anything else you would need to sort of talk about and agree on today?
I think I would need to understand what it is that you're looking for from me. In particular, I believe that you should have those meetings with the whole department as well, departmental meetings, but in particular, some markers as to, you know, what it is you expect from me, and you know, what it is you need me to cover for that fortnight ahead, and for me to know what you're handling.
Okay, so that's really helpful, Charlie. And you've said there that those meetings perhaps should be with you, and perhaps sometimes should be with the whole department,
yes.
and that what you'd really like is to know what's expected of you, as well as to be able to say what's going on for you, which I understood was part of the concern. You'd like to be able to share that, but you'd also like Chris to tell you what expectations are, what the priorities are for the next couple of weeks.
Yes, because if he says what the priorities are, then I could, you know, in our follow-up meeting, we could discuss, are we able to achieve it, what are the issues, and therefore we resolve issues as they go.
And if you were to sort of really drill down and say, when would that happen? You know, what would be the agreement from today going forward as to when would you have the first meeting, and you know, how would you make sure those were scheduled regularly and not overlooked? in the future? Do you have some thoughts about that?
Well, I think it can start straight away, but I don't know if 2 weeks is like a good time period. I think every month is fine if I'm just checking in what Charlie's doing. Quite frankly, it would just be nice if Charlie stepped out of her director kind of mindset and just understood that I understand her role as senior administrator and she wants to know what's going on, but it's not easy doing my role if there's constantly a hawk like on my shoulder trying to kind of make things difficult and not allowing me to actually fulfill the role that I'm trying to achieve. So
it sounds like there, Chris, you're worried about what the expectation of sharing information would be from Charlie, that maybe she's expecting you to share information that she might have had privy to if she was a director. That sounds like that might be your concern.
yeah, because if as a director, it is my role to do particular things. And I do understand that as a senior administrator, there are certain things that you would want to know about, and in terms of developing policy, I understand. But if she's constantly in the loop of everything that I'm meant to be doing, it's she might as well have the role as director if she knows everything. So I think I do understand that you do want to be kept in the loop and understand what the process is and where progress is going. But I think there needs to be a level of understanding that I am the director and she is the administrator.
So what I'm wondering from today is, what if you were to go back to work and have this as an agreement, as something, as an outcome, how would you like to define that? We can write it down or not writing down. It might be helpful to write down what your expectation is from today, so that you're clear about that. It could be something that we could, that you both have a copy of. But I'm not quite sure that we finally agreed. I mean, you say 2 weekly, Charlie, and you say maybe every month, and there's a little bit of disagreement still about what you might cover in those meetings. So what if we might sort of drill down there a bit more? And also, you may find as the meetings start that you're getting clearer about that.
I'm happy to drill down a little. I mean, for me, we have 6 people in the department, including ourselves. While you're taking on directorship, let's say, roles, while you're fulfilling your role with the board, you expect for me to manage the rest of the members of our team, because I'm senior HR administrator. So I have to manage the HR administrator, the HR advisor, the payroll officer, and our health and safety manager. So just as you would expect from me to manage those, then of course I would need to have an idea of what, I don't need to know everything that you're doing, but what decisions will be involved in your decision making. But I should be aware of at least a fair amount of your role as HR director. So I understand what it is I'm meant to be doing, and I understand what I should expect from you as my director. But if I have no idea whatsoever, and you just put this, wall of secrecy, I'm a board director, you're still a HR director. So I have to understand what your goals are for the department, what you're doing to ensure that your department is functioning, as well as you telling me what it is that you expect for me to do. And then we can have those meetings and discuss the issues and, what's working, what's not, what I'm having difficulty with, what you're unhappy with, or what you're happy with. But I feel, and I don't think once a month is possible. It's not realistic. It's far too much.
Charlie, that was helpful what I heard from you, in that you did say you didn't expect Chris to share all of his director's information and so on, but that you would like him to share the goals, and particularly you said earlier, so that you were clear what your expectations were. One of the things I talked to Joe about before I came in, and what we have agreed is that there will be, if you're both willing, a follow-up meeting from today. So it might be possible to try something out, for example, meeting every 2 weeks or whatever, and see how that goes. And then when I come in again, we would just review, is that working, and you sharing the right kind of information. So that would be something I would normally do, and I've offered to do in this case, is that whatever the outcome from today is, if there's some kind of working relationship going forward, I'll come back in a few weeks' time, and we'll just explore what's working and what's not working and why not, if that makes sense. So, whatever you agree today isn't set in stone. It's just something you can go away and try out and see, does it make a difference, is it helping? And then I can come back in again and we can explore, is that working or not working. So I wonder on that basis, what you'd like to sort of set up as a trial period, given that I would come back in about a month's time maybe.
We can do your 2 weeks, because at least by then we would have had 2 meetings. I think one wouldn't be enough for us to actually explain what we're meant to be going through and things like that. So at least if we get the opportunities to do it twice, I think that would be a good amount of time for us to decide if it's meant to be every month or every 2 weeks.
It's fair enough.
So that's a helpful start. And is there a particular day of the week on which you feel you'd like to have those meetings, just to sort of be clear where you're going to start?
Well, Chris is my director, so I believe that you should set the day. Anyone probably have a busier schedule.
Well, if you want the outlook for the forwarding fortnight, then every Monday is fine.
So what I'm hearing is that you will start from today meeting on a Monday. You'll have a sort of, I don't know how long would you think that meeting would last, half an hour, or do you think you need longer for that? What would your sense?
I think it's every 2 weeks and half an hour. And then we can just,
Okay.
but it depends on if that's fine.
So that might be something we'll just write down at the end of the meeting today, just to be clear what you've agreed, and then we'll follow up later and see, is that working, and you can see what kind of information you're sharing and so on. Are you happy with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So the second thing you wanted to sort of talk about in terms of outcomes was a sense of leadership skills. Charlie, you mentioned that in particular, what you're expecting from Chris in terms of leadership skills, and in particular thinking again now about what is it you actually want to see, what kind of outcome from today would be good, would help you in your department to move forward from today.
Well, firstly, I don't know how do you intend to lead the department. At the moment, I'm not seeing leadership, so I don't know what is your leadership approach. I would like to see you sit down with the whole department and tell us how. I don't imagine any 2 directors are the same. No 2 managers the same, no 2 people handle the job the same way. But I'd like to know what your approach is. I think the whole department is, it's not just for me, because if we understand what your approach is and why that's the approach you've chosen, then perhaps we will fall behind, and we will support that. At the moment, we're completely in the cold, in the dark.
So, Charlie, you're saying you'd like Chris to explain his leadership style, if you like, or leadership. And you talked earlier approach, thank you, and you talked earlier about goals. You'd like really to know what the goals for the department are. Is there anything else specific in terms of what you expect or what you feel is missing in terms of leadership there? What does leadership actually mean to you?
Does Chris intend to, is your intention to just, let's say, develop an initiative, and then you're saying, oh no, I have a very freestyle approach, and I'm leaving it all to the department, and we run it as we want, and your goal is, make it work? It's got to be, I want to understand when you implement something, how will you follow it through? What do you expect us to do? Are you going to remain hands-off approach? But if so, what will your involvement be? I mean, it can't possibly be without any oversight to nothing. Otherwise, you wouldn't be managing the department.
So Charlie, you gave a specific example, and you did refer to it earlier about sort of policies, and in particular the wellbeing initiative, and that you kind of felt that was sort of started as an initiative but not followed through. So in a sense, I'm hearing from you that you're talking about follow through. What does that actually look like? What do you mean by follow through? What would you expect from Chris in terms of following through on initiatives?
Well, let's take for example these new work-life balance initiative. You've designed the policy, you say you're making it work, you're trying to implement it. I mean, I would expect follow through to be, well, first of all, you sit down with us, tell us what the policy is, explain to us what you will be doing to try and implement it. What do you want us to do? You may say, for example, Charlie, could you look to see other similar policies in place from other organisations, how they're drafted. I would like you to be involved with the drafting. I would like the HR administrator and the HR advisor to work with the payroll officer to look through how many hours people are working over those times. Let's get some statistics behind it. How would it affect if we did implement this policy? Who will be doing what? What is it you expect? Obviously, for you to implement that policy, it would, and for you to convince the CEO, that would require information behind it. Do you expect me to do it all? Is it something that you just want me to deal with? Perhaps you might say to me, with this new initiative, I just want it to be yourself and I working on it, and then once we get to a certain stage 2, we will involve the other members of the team, and then we will set them goals. That's follow through, but at the moment I can't see. So yes.
So Charlie, what I'm hearing there is you seem to be asking for sort of guidance or direction, and also it sounds like a kind of project plan. Here is the plan, but here's how it would develop. In a stage and who would you expect to be involved in, more step-by-step process as to how this would be rolled out, if you like, a project plan, as I say. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yes, I don't expect Chris to be telling us what to draft, exactly what to do, but it is for Chris to set the goals for his department and who he wants to handle what and in what time scale, if there is a time scale. But similarly, that also applies to the day-to-day management. Does he want, goals? And he doesn't have to be involved in the day-to-day management, but he has to have an oversight and set goals. What is working well? What should be improved on? What is our time scale for improving on this element? What could be done? Is there something that perhaps Chris needs to do to help us improve a certain element?
So Chris, I don't know what you're hearing there, but there's a sense in which Charlie is asking for more guidance or more direction on, and if you remember, she did say earlier how much she appreciated your initiatives, so that they were one of your strengths, but what she's saying is she would appreciate as well, some more guidance, some more clarity about what the rollout actually looks like in terms of a sort of more concrete project plan. What do you think about that?
I can understand the lack of delegation, and obviously that contributes to the fact that she doesn't know, you don't know what's going on and what you need to be doing in terms of goals and things. And that's, I guess that is down to me and how I manage my initiatives, and I give an idea, but I don't really manage the project as much. And I think like, I have been here for 20 months and I am trying, but I would be willing to, like, I don't know, go, like, enhance my skills, or maybe go on a course or something that would help me kind of learn the process of delegating, and then I guess in that sense it would kind of help you know exactly what you're meant to be doing, who you're meant to be managing, basically. Yeah, so a more like top-down approach to actual leadership. Like, if I show that I am a good leader, then everything will fall into place, and that, I guess, comes into the 2-week meeting things as well. If I learn how to manage that a bit better, then you'll know exactly in those meetings what you're meant to be doing.
So Chris, that's really helpful there. I mean, you said a number of things. You know, one is that you have only been in post for 20 months and that there's a lot going on, but you have also said, I think really I'm hearing, that you do acknowledge there's perhaps some skills that you could learn a bit more about. You'd be happy to and even willing to go on a course and then put that into practice. So I wonder if that's something you'd be happy to write down as an outcome and to explore, and perhaps when I come back in a month's time we could see where you'd got to with finding a suitable course and so on.
I would be more than willing to write that down. I believe in everyone's personal development, so I should invest in my own as well.
How does that sound to you?
Yeah,
Charlie?
I think that's a good outcome. I feel that if Chris does attend a senior leadership course, then that could impact us positively.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. I mean, you've ticked off a couple of things there, which you've actually reached, some agreement for now on, and something we'll follow up on. The final thing, just to talk briefly about, and I know our sort of time now is nearly up, particularly on this video, but you talked about, the final thing on my list was this sense of the relationship between you. You expressed it in terms, Charlie, of feeling not really cared for, particularly when you were sick, and clearly there's been tension between you, but I wonder if there's anything specific that you'd like to agree in terms of how you will relate to each other. I know it's hard when you've had a kind of breakdown in relationship to work out how you get that back on track, but are there any specific things, particularly in the time between when I leave you today and when I come back in a month's time, that you would feel you'd like to see from each other or experience from each other in terms of how you relate to each other on a day-to-day basis?
I think if Charlie does feel upset or feels as though I should have done something differently, then I'm open for you to approach me and explain to me what the issue was and how I could have done that better. But in terms of affecting the whole atmosphere of the whole office, that's where the main breakdown has come from. So I think it's important for you to understand that you can come and talk to me specifically, and also just to reiterate that I have been very supportive of you in terms of your development and encouraging you to go to night school and things like that. You explaining that you can take leave. I think one of the things you did mention was I've been focusing on my own well-being and not the well-being of everyone else, and I disagree with that, but I think maybe I should have made more of a point of you being able to take that time out when you could have. I had apologised about it before, but I think just making sure that you remember that you can speak to me when you want to, basically.
Thank you.
So Chris, yes, thank you, Chris. So you reiterated your apology to Charlie there, and I'm sure that's very helpful. And also that you are happy to hear when she's not happy about something, when she wants to share something with you. So I'm sure that may be something you can explore and try out a bit, and see how that goes in terms of being able to give some feedback to each other. So you kind of acknowledge that perhaps there's some things you've missed, but that you've been trying hard to make things right for Charlie, but perhaps focusing on things that Charlie didn't see or that were other things were important for her. And similarly, are there things from your side, Charlie, that you feel that you'd be able to do in the next few weeks that would help to rebuild your relationship?
I feel that if you are committed to attending a leadership course and improving your communication with the department, then I will be more mindful of any criticisms I have of you in terms of sharing it with the department, and try to ensure that any negativity I have isn't relayed to the others. I would also ask for you to think about what in practice it means for me to be able to pursue education, because in reality, I don't have time or money at the moment. So I appreciate you saying that you give me the time. I'd like perhaps that to be put into writing for me.
So one thing I did hear there, Charlie, is that you would be more mindful about how you behave, if you like, or behave towards each other, but in particular not spreading negative feelings or thoughts to the rest of the team, and that would be, I'm sure, very helpful for Chris. But you also said you would like to actually include in the written agreement the opportunity for you also to explore your training.
Yes, because Chris says he's very pro personal development, and you've said that several times during this meeting, this mediation. So I would like to know how that's going to be handled. Is the company going to fund it? Are you going to give me a day release? I'd like to understand how you will help me also develop my skills.
Thank you. So let me just summarise where we got to, and then I'm afraid the time for this video is up. But what I've understood that we have agreed on, or that you've both discussed, and we will now work on writing up into some form of agreement, is that you will have check-in meetings. Initially you're going to try having those every 2 weeks on a Monday for 30 minutes, and exploring some of the things that you've talked about, what the goals for the team might be, sharing some of your goals and directions that you have as a director. Chris, you'd like to go on a leadership course and then explore how that makes a difference to what your leadership skills are and how you lead the department. You've both talked about your behaviours and how you will support that change in the future. And finally, Charlie, you've talked about yourself exploring some training opportunities for yourself. So what I suggest is that we take a break now, and that we come back and write that into an agreement, and then we'll make a date for me to come back in a month's time and see how you're getting on.
Okay.
So thank you both for your time. Now we'll take a quick break and then we'll come back later.
Thank you.
But thank you.
Thank you.
Here we are.
Jane, do you have some questions?
Yes, I'm happy to take questions, of course. Oh, 2 hands straight away.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
How often do you do the sort of review process where you come back, and how long is your usual review?
Yeah, so what I've role-played today is very much how I would manage this kind of mediation, because where you've got ongoing relationships, I find it very helpful to be able to, I did develop a term called slow mediation. I think some mediations are too fast, that actually, if you take it a bit more slowly, give people time to reflect on what they're learning. So the other thing that I sometimes do in this kind of mediation is it's combined, the mediation itself is combined sometimes with some sort of coaching skills, some conflict management coaching, helping the parties to understand why is the conflict escalated to the stage it's at, how did they get there, what are some sort of conflict behaviours. So very often people are in conflict because they don't understand why the behaviours they've been using have pressed people's triggers and have made things worse, and that's why it spirals out of control. So just sharing a bit of the sort of theory of conflict with them and some of those behaviours can be a little bit of a coaching session, but I often combine that either now or at a later stage, which helps them to go and have some things to reflect on. I also have a little book which I wrote, which is the Authority Guide to Conflict Resolution, and we share that with the parties, so they might go away, it takes about an hour to read, but they might go away and reflect on that, and what they often come back with is that all marked up and say this section was really helpful to me, or that section. So I'm giving them a little bit of theory behind it as well. So I do find it's helpful to let them have a break and some time for reflection, and then they're going back after a month or so again. You know, if the company is willing to pay for that, I think it's really time well spent, because you know they're trying things out, and you know, to be able to reflect that with someone and see, is it working, is it not working, is really helpful. And also to know that you're there as an ongoing support, and even after that meeting, you know, people have got my card, if there's a crisis, that I'm there on the end of the phone as a sort of, you know, sounding board. So yeah. Anything else? Yes, you had a question.
So reading the brief, I see that there is the potential for a dismissal claim. Is there any reason why you didn't mention without prejudice to the parties, or?
Well, I kind of did. I said if you take, you know, if you go forward to a tribunal, that it wouldn't be used in a future thing. But we were trying to move away from the sort of legal format of this particular one, which is we not involve the lawyers in this particular role play. So yeah, I didn't use those particular words, but yes.
Following on from that, I have two questions. One, following on from that, I noticed you didn't say in your introduction to either of them or in the mediation, you're here voluntarily.
Yes.
Was there a reason for that?
No, I mean, I don't follow a prescribed thing. I'm CEDA trained, but I don't sort of follow the, you know, I don't, it's kind of a bit more free-flowing for me, so I don't always follow the exact prescribed sort of introductory statement.
The reason I'm asking is because I think sometimes, especially in a workplace mediation, a party could feel very aggrieved. They've been forced to come.
Yeah.
So I just wondered what your reflections
possibly,
on that
if I felt that either party felt that, I might address it. You know, yes,
Okay.
You're quite right. It's a valid and relevant point.
The other question I had is, this is the first simulation or actual mediation that I've watched, which repeats every single conversation I heard. I think I heard. I've never heard that before. Never seen it before.
Yes.
And I'm wondering whether it alters the dynamics.
It does. I don't always do it. It depends on the context. I was explaining to someone I met earlier today that one of the things I've been trained in is transformative mediation, which is very much focusing on the conversation and giving control back to the parties. Doesn't necessarily work in a commercial mediation with lawyers, because they would get very frustrated at that. The reason I do it here, and as you can see, it enabled the parties to come to their own decision, because you give them back control of the conversation and you make it very clear that they are guiding that conversation. So yes, I agree, in some situations it's not appropriate or not appropriate to follow that, but the reason for that is that enables them to really hear each other fully what they've said.
Sure.
So it's kind of a risky thing to do, if you like, that you have to sense whether is this going too slowly or is it frustrating people. I myself was party to not a mediation but a facilitation last week, so I was able to experience how frustrating it can be when things go slowly or seem to go too slowly, or someone's doing things that, so it's a balance really. You know, sometimes people want you to jump up and use the flip chart, sometimes they want you to sort of go faster. You just have to, I mean, partly I'm conscious of the video today and being able to enable you know, people to really explore things. It's a bit artificial with the time limit as well today, but that's just one particular style that I use, particularly in this kind of workplace, or you know, where people have really got probably some deep things, because I think sometimes you don't give people time, they don't go deep enough in what they come up with, they sort of skirt over the sort of issues really. Yeah. Questions here?
I think we were told that this was based on a real case.
Yes, it was.
So how many hours did it take in reality?
I can't remember. It was some time ago. I mean, I would say about 10 years ago I mediated this case, so it's hard for me to remember. I think it involved several meetings actually, because I would have gone in and met with the senior director first before being introduced to the HR team. We did have legal discussions about was there going to be some sort of termination agreement, or were they both going to continue working together. So it was much longer than this one. I think I probably had 3 or 4 sessions of going into the organisation and working with different combinations of people. And it is a bit like that for me with this kind of work, is each time we're thinking, well, who would I see next, who needs to be involved. So in this particular case, in the role play that you've got, there are more people involved, and even Charlie has talked about other members of the department. So one of the things to explore is there anybody else who ought to be involved in discussions with me or in the mediation process to actually make this work? Because sometimes it's not just about these 2 people, it could be involving perhaps the director, and this is a particularly complex case because it's an organisation with overseas branches. So in reality, you've got to explore are the right people around the table. We've kept it simple today, but in reality, it's much more complex than this.
Also, I've got to ask, with workplace disputes like this, do you always have a joint session?
Not always. I mean, everything has to be. If people don't feel they can sit in a room together, I would encourage it because it's the best way for them to hear each other and to really. But it's not always possible. Sometimes people say, I can't. I did a family business case last year where the party said, I can't. I physically couldn't be in the same room as the other party. And that may change during the day, but it doesn't always change. So you have to be very sensitive to that, because actually, if you put people in the room and they've said they can't be, they may have a very violent reaction to that, physically and health-wise. So it's important not to push something just because you think it might be right if they say that's not what we want.
But if they end up not being able to sit together in a room, how likely are they going to be able to work together in the end?
Well, that might not be. So I used to think when I was mediating workplace disputes that actually my job was to recreate harmony, but it's not. My job is to create an outcome that works for both parties and for the organisation. And that might be that they never work together again, that one of them leaves the organisation, that they work in different departments, that they, at that time, they've got to work out what the situation is that they can deal with, and also what the way forward is. And that's not my choice, it's their choice. So, so an effective outcome to the mediation, when you say, did it settle or was it successful? Success is, did we make a shift in them understanding where each other's coming from? Did they get clear about what the issue is for them and what the options were going forward? And did they make a conscious choice as to what they wanted to do? And I think those are good outcomes, as well as, because sometimes putting people back together, it might all blow apart. I might go away and go, we got a settlement, but if a month later I hear that it all blew apart again, that it wasn't a settlement. And that's the danger with workplace, is that people might try and please me or try and please their bosses by saying, we'll do this and we'll go forward, but it isn't actually a success. So what success looks like is not for me to determine, it's for them to determine. You had a question?
It's similar, but can you remember what the actual real outcome was? I know it's a long time ago. 10 years, I probably wouldn't remember.
I can't.
Doesn't matter.
Particularly, I think there was some agreement that they continued working together. As far as I remember, there wasn't a termination. I don't think, but interestingly enough, and I think this one probably is, I have similar cases which are similar, and I think, oh gosh, which one was it? Or I may have, even in writing it up, merged a couple of cases to make sure it was anonymous. Yeah, not sure. Any other questions? More over here.
I noticed that you asked about the outcome at every stage. I was wondering if in real life people actually change their mind and make conscious decision after every stage, or some people stay with what they wanted in the first place and just stick with it?
No, people do change their mind, and that's okay, isn't it, really? I mean, the thing is, have we got to the right place at the end rather than how I've done this today may be slightly different, because I'm very conscious that it's a sort of role play and that it's to a camera and it's artificial. So I may have gone at a different speed, or I may have done different things if it were in reality. But I think, you know, checking with people is important, because all the time they are reflecting on things and thinking. So it's an evolving process, if you like. It's evolving in terms of what they're thinking and what they're feeling and what they see opening up for them. So I think it is important to keep giving them back control, and it is that sense of control, I think, that's important. Yeah. So do you have a question?
No, I didn't. I was
Just waving at
actively
me.
listening.
Can I ask another one?
Yes.
I hesitated to ask before. You said giving them back a sense of control is key, and I totally agree.
Yeah.
So I was surprised you didn't use the flip chart to
Yes.
say, are we agreed this is one of the issues you want to come back to, so that all three of you are in
Yes.
control of that?
I probably would have done in reality. I do use the flip chart a lot.
It's just
I'm sort of
inclusive.
conscious of the
Yeah.
camera and
Sure.
standing up and getting in the way, but and tripping over my bags as
Yes,
well.
yes, sure.
But I do use the flip chart a lot, and I probably and certainly in the next phase where we were writing up the agreement, I'd put it up on the flip chart. In fact, in some workplace things, we've had the whole agreement written up on the flip chart with everybody contributing. And I very much, you know, sometimes the parties are also encouraged to get up and use the flip chart too. So I think it's a brilliant tool, using the flip chart. It's really fantastic. So I would encourage people to use it. Did you have a question, Leslie? No.
Actually, how much you think it's important the workplace to have the private conversations, perhaps a couple of days beforehand, which just allows that reflection time and for people to perhaps come into a different mode when they actually do then.
I do, and actually even in commercial cases, I think if we made time for it, it's more complex. But when you come into a meeting and you don't actually have any sense of knowing someone, and having met them on a sort of personal basis, having seen them, having heard their voice, having sort of, you know, had a cup of tea with them, it's a very different start to your mediation. And I was, so I did one of the mediations that was a huge success many years ago with a colleague, was a co-mediation of a complex trust and construction case where there were many lawyers and parties, and we said let's all have dinner together the night before. So all the lawyers and all the parties met, and there was only one ground rule: we don't talk about the case. So everybody talked about their holidays and their hobbies, and when we met the next day, the atmosphere was completely different. And so there's an awful lot. I did a workshop a couple of years ago on, you know, running a mediation, but sometimes I say, think about it as if you're a hostess and you're running a party. This is a dinner party, you know, so I might in reality, I probably would bring a lot of chocolate actually. Chocolate on the table is always a great lubricator of conversation. So chocolate, cakes, oranges, you know, think about what will lighten the atmosphere, what will enable people to feel a bit more relaxed, is always a good thing. So think about it like a party or a dinner party.
Jane, can I just add to that?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've started at ADR ODR is when you get appointed on your case, we would like the mediators to have a video conversation at the basic minimum with the parties.
Yeah.
And we've seen in the last 2.5 years that when we get to the mediation and we send an evaluation form to the parties, they say the mediation day started having already felt like you knew the mediator.
Absolutely.
Now, so if you're unable to have the dinner party or something similar, and with workplace mediation, one of our challenges, we're getting quite a lot of workplace cases recently, is they're in the middle of nowhere. So, and of course cost is a massive factor for companies. So having the video conversation 3 days before is fantastic. And I'm not sure, many of you may know of EAPs, Employee Assistance Programs, who now offer active mediation to people within those organizations. And we do one in one of the European countries which has lots of islands. And so when there's a dispute in one of the banks that we work with on the islands, of course you can't take flights back and forth as quickly as you'd like, but technology allows us to create that. Now of course it's not the same as being in person, but it does change the whole dynamic. And when all our training courses incorporate online mediation training anyway.
It's the next best thing, and it's certainly possible these days to do effective video?
Well, I mean, it's a must now if you're going to join our panel, that people will be able to connect with their parties online.
Fantastic.
I've written down dinner party anyway, that's my take.
That's the bit. That's the bit to take away, isn't it? Let's have another party.
That's a great way of,
Well,
if you can do
in reality, I often find that whatever the subject matter of the conflict, we generally find that there are moments of lightness and moments of laughter in mediations. Even some of the darkest mediations have had moments of lightness and moments of laughter. And I think that is down to the atmosphere that you create and what you bring in. I have a story a bit about that, is that I was chosen to mediate a very sad medical negligence case where a young couple had actually lost their baby. And 3 names had been put forward. I was to go, I forget where I was going. Anyway, I think I had to go over to Ireland actually. Because it was so important that they had the right mediator, the lawyers had asked the parties to have a look at the 3 choices of mediators and see which one they would like. And one of the parties had, in fact the couple who'd lost their baby, had Googled my name. And what they found was, hidden away on YouTube somewhere, is a video clip of outtakes of me promoting one of my books, and it's me literally, these are the outtakes, it's me literally fluffing my lines, collapsing in giggles, mostly giggling and falling about all over the place. And they looked at this video and they thought, is this the right kind of person to mediate our conflict, our highly sort of emotional, and they decided it was. So on the basis of my outtakes, I got hired for that mediation, which I had never intended that video to be for, but it just shows what people are actually looking for. They're looking for a sense of humanity and you know, something that can make this day bearable, really, and that's what it was. So I was surprised, but I think they were surprised too. But and in fact, that mediation settled as well. So you know, it was an interesting one. Yeah.
I'm going to formally close if that's okay, and I'm going to switch off our live broadcast.